I was just telling Alexandra, it's so hard when your camera's not on before you start to know if it's like in a good spot or.
Totally. I know you need that second to kind of adjust everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Hi, Helen.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, super fun. We've got a lot of people coming in, which is so great to see. Welcome, everyone. There is a chat box, so as you're coming in, please feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. That'd be really fun to know.
I think we're going to wait a couple more minutes before we officially kick off the event, just to make sure that people have a chance to sign in and get set up here.
Yeah. Oh, hi, Julia from Minneapolis. Nice. Ooh, Indiana. We're across North America right now. Do we have anyone tuning in from Europe or? Oh, nice. New York City. Look at that.
New Jersey, basically the same. Oh, nice. Pakistan.
Hello,
First
welcome.
International.
Boston. This is so nice. Usually when Alexandra and I do these, because it's the Ottawa chapter, we're obviously pretty, I would say, hyper-focused to the Ottawa area, but this is so great to see. We've got people tuning in from everywhere.
Got a couple of Bay Area folks.
Yeah.
I see Elizabeth.
And Nick in Vancouver, has the rain, is this your rainy season in Vancouver? I don't know what the rain, and maybe it's always rainy in Vancouver. Okay, it sure is nice. I was going to say, I'm like, I think that this time of year might be that. Hey, Sam. Oh, my computer's already heating up. The energy of the chat.
That's why I have to put on the headphones. Otherwise, you'd hear the roaring of my laptop.
Yeah, that's exactly mine right now. Hopefully, it's not coming through the headphones.
It's not.
Oh, good. Awesome. Oh, yeah, I can scope out the attendee list. Love it. And for those of you just joining us, say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We're going to start in about 2 minutes. Alexandra was just saying it would be really nice if there was a way to play some like music in this part of it. And I agree. It would be really
Totally.
nice.
Maybe a little warm-up karaoke.
Oh my goodness. That would honestly give me life. I would love that. I'm not shy when it comes to karaoke.
Same.
Yeah. Oh,
it's the best.
So fun.
Yeah. Half the fun for in-person events is picking out the right playlist to set the mood for in-person stuff.
Yeah.
Totally.
Hello from the Dominican Republic. Oh, this is so fun.
It's awesome.
It's amazing. I don't know if any of you are computer fans, but I have a Commodore 64 right there. If anyone's into computers, I'm so excited. It was my first computer when I was growing up, and I now have one, except I don't have the hard drive. So I can't actually do anything with it, which is why it's now on the shelf. Yeah, it's sitting there. It's an artifact.
Amazing.
Yeah. Cool. Should we get started?
Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's event. We've been really looking forward to hosting this conversation around asynchronous communication and remote work for a while now. And so when we started this whole Slack community chapter about a year ago, Erin and I were really focused on talks for developers who were building on the platform and different use cases for Slack. And we actually held our last event back in January at Shopify. And since that point, Slack has obviously become a much bigger part of our lives and is helping bring people together at work right now, making like professional interactions easier, but also doing a lot of facilitation around those interpersonal interactions that we're missing out on from not being in person. So it felt kind of right to pivot this community for this event to talk more about how we're communicating and how we're making use of tools like Slack to do this communication instead of focusing on that building aspect of it for now. So if you're new to these events, I did want to give a quick heads up that this is actually a part of a global group called the Slack Platform Community, which is run by Elizabeth Kinsey, who's actually in the chat here. So if you have any questions about it, I'm sure she'll be around to answer those. But essentially, there are dozens of chapters all over the world that host events like this one and are run by different local leaders in different cities who also either like use Slack regularly within their organizations or are building on the platform. All of these events have had to go virtual for now, which is, I mean, there are downsides. It's fun hanging out in person, but there's a huge upside because now we get to participate in all the events going on around the world, as like we can see from the attendees coming from, like all of you come from so many different spots. And so I think that's a really great benefit to the situation right now. But you can check out all of the events coming up at slackcommunity.com and join chapters that are local to you. For this event in particular, so this is the Ottawa chapter, which is run by me, I'm Alexandra Sunderland, and Erin Blasky. So we're both working at Fellow, which is a platform for teams to build collaborative meeting agendas, record decisions, collect feedback, and keep each other accountable. Erin's the director of marketing, and I'm an engineering manager for the ecosystem team, which in part builds our Slack application. If you want to check that out, it's actually on the homepage of the Slack app directory right now, right at the top. So very easy access to that. And before this, we were actually both working remotely for many years. So we have a lot of experience with communication challenges and the things that we're going to be talking about today. The chapter that we lead has run a bunch of events in the past with companies like Shopify and SurveyMonkey, and we're going to be running some more virtual events going forward. This is the first one, but we have some coming up soon that are planned, and you can go to slackcommunity.com/Ottawa to join that community and get notified about the upcoming events and get access to this global Slack workspace where you can connect with everyone throughout the community and get access to channels about like the Slack API and different things if you want to build on the platform. So today we have two wonderful and strong leaders as panelists for a discussion, which is going to be moderated by Erin. So first we have Helen, who is the Director of Product Strategy of the Future Forum, a consortium launched by Slack to help companies reimagine work in the new digital-first world. Previously, Helen led the strategy and analytics team at Slack, where she drove various cross-functional initiatives, like launching international launch strategy, such as international launch and strategy, building the success services offering, and leading Slack's fundraising efforts. We also have Megan, who is helping to build the future of location-flexible work across the globe, serving as Director of Content and Events for Distribute Consulting and the Director of the Remote Work Association. She's a passionate advocate for the power that remote work has to solve some of the world's biggest problems, positively impacting income and gender equality, environmental sustainability, and overall human health and well-being. We also have the hashtag SPC Ottawa, so feel free to tweet your favorite moments of the panel or post on LinkedIn and things like that. And we also have the chat panel available on the right-hand side of the screen, which we'll be monitoring. And if you have any questions for the panelists or anything you want to add, feel free to message us there. And I will now pass it over to Erin to kick off the panel.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's honestly so great to have you here. And oh, look at us. Now we're in larger mode, which is so nice to see all your faces. Yeah. So I'm honestly so excited about this chat today. Obviously, you know, if we kind of go back to the beginning of the year, Alexandra mentioned we held one of our last in-person event, and then this global pandemic hit, right? Everything changed. For a lot of companies, that meant forced remote work. It meant moving into sort of a new way of showing up to business every day. And for a lot of employees, that was all brand new. I mean, everyone was sort of navigating this space together. And as a result, there's a lot of different challenges that have come out of that, but also opportunities. And one of the, I think, unique challenges is sort of understanding how in this new remote world, you balance things like deep work to disruptions, and how you balance asynchronous versus synchronous communication, and what all of that looks like. So I'm really excited about this chat today. I know that there's going to be so many interesting things that we're going to learn, and experiences that we can definitely take back to our own companies, and hopefully help make this sort of new remote world a little bit easier. So with that said, let's kick things off. So Helen, I'm going to start with you. As Alexandra mentioned, you know, your work with the Future Forum has you sort of reimagining work in this new digital first world. I want to ask you, just what does the future of work look like for you?
That's a really great question. It's a broad and general and hard question. Earlier this year, the Future Forum actually launched a survey to over 9,000 knowledge workers all around the world. And in that survey, you know, we found things that are, I think, fairly obvious to a lot of us in the room right now. There are clear benefits to working, you know, remotely. There's better work-life balance. We don't have the commute anymore, but there are clear challenges that I'm sure we all feel, right? Wi-Fi sucks. Sometimes your computer is on fire, and it's really hard to build connections and get to know people through, you know, 2 dimensions over Zoom and Zoom fatigue. And what was really interesting for us is, even despite all of those challenges, we found that 72% of knowledge workers, you know, still expected some form of flexibility going forward. And that's a combination of office and remote work. And what that means for companies is that they're going to be expected to, you know, shift away from office-centric norms to more people-centric norms. And so, for example, you know, I'm a new mom. I have a 10-month-old, and I am not going to be as excited about sitting an hour in public transportation to get to the office to work, you know, a typical sort of 9 to 5 schedule based on office constraints. Instead, I'm going to be looking for, you know, more flexibility in my hours, more flexibility in my job. And that looks like, you know, working hours where I'm most productive. So that can be, you know, early morning for some of us, late evenings for others. It really depends. And more importantly, it's about, you know, being able to chunk up my day and chunk up those hours so that I can, you know, make it to the baby doctor appointment if I need to, or, you know, take that midday run. What I think the future of work looks like is employees are going to be, you know, less willing to mold themselves and their lifestyles to kind of the work environment, but rather, you know, expect work to meet us where we are, and who, you know, where our situations are across all different types of, you know, situations, personalities, etc. And what I find really interesting about our work is that none of this is new. We've always wanted this, right? Mm-hmm. We've always wanted this sort of choice, flexibility, autonomy. And COVID just presented this really great opportunity for us to challenge the status quo. There's no sort of putting things back into Pandora's box going forward. And so that's why I think the Future Forum work is super interesting, because we're really helping companies figure out, okay, if there is no snap back to normal, you know, how do we actually help you change those norms and expectations? How do you work with your employees to understand what they need, to feel supported, to feel like they are being their best and whole selves at work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love what you said about, you know, the switch from office-centric norms to people-centric norms. I think that's so key to not only navigating the pandemic and all of the emotions and stressors that come along with that, but just this move to remote is such a it's new, it's newfound territory for people, and it is so different, right? It's such a transactional way to work, and there's so many things that you just said that I am so excited to dig into further. But before we do that, Megan, I would also love to just explore that same question with you. So obviously, as the director of the Remote Work Association, I'm sure you're having tons of conversations with companies and people that are starting to navigate this space. So what does the future of work look like for you?
Yeah. Oh man. And I think first and foremost, it's important to note that, the current work from home situation is not normal, right? Like for those of us that worked from home before the pandemic, it felt different, And so I think I try as much as possible to sort of qualify every conversation with that this will look different moving forward. And we don't know what that looks like exactly yet. So for everyone who might be really new to remote work, be patient, hang in there. If you're loving it, great, like continue doubling down on that. If it's been really challenging for you, know that it will get better. Like we are under a lot of stress at home right now, a lot of anxiety globally. So feel you on that and not having the flexibility to sort of leave the house and go. I know for me, going to work at like a coffee shop and switching up my day, or going to co-work with a friend who also works remotely. It's just very different right now. So, but I think that's important for companies to remember. But for those that are going remote for the first time, a lot of the concerns that we're hearing about are like way too many meetings. Of course, a good principle of remote work best practices over communicating, but not necessarily doing that in a meeting is obviously what we're advocating for. So we'll get more into that asynchronicity a bit later, but that's definitely an issue. Generally, people are concerned about health and safety of their workers, as they navigate kind of what the future holds in that return to work planning. A lot of companies don't know yet what that return to work plan will look like. Are they going back to the office? Are they going to be hybrid? Are they going to be fully remote? And that's been a real challenge to not only figure out what strategic decision do we make as a company, but how do we communicate that to our people? Our people are getting antsy. They want to know what the future holds. And there's still just so much uncertainty. So that is incredibly challenging for people right now. And hiring and onboarding is something people are really talking a lot more about, right? 7 months into the pandemic, maybe people were under hiring freezes early on, but settling into this and knowing that, all right, we're going to have to continue to grow, and 2021 is right around the corner, and we're not snapping back to normal in 2021. It is not going to be a magic wand as soon as December 31st, 11:59 hits. Like things are not changing on January 1st. So that has been a real challenge for people. And, I think early on, the big concern, and it's still a concern, of course, is around, how do you adapt culture for a remote environment? And I think, early on in the pandemic, people were most concerned about connection and how to ensure that people, culture is maintained remotely. And I think, the big challenge that people are having there is trying to avoid just duplicating an office experience and putting it on, a Zoom call or doing that remotely. And I think the challenge is really leaning into how you redesign the employee experience and leverage remote really as a strategy and as a benefit versus let's just get everyone together as much as we can to ensure connection, because our needs are different now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You've said so many things. I jotted a bunch of notes down as you were talking, because there are so many things that I'm so excited to dig into. And I think there's so many. Okay, let's just start in one spot, because my mind is now racing. So where I want to start is let's go to the people, back to sort of this idea of people first. And, we've talked a lot about, like both yourself, Helen and Megan, you both mentioned this sort of idea of transactional nature of work and maintaining that people connection and maintaining the human element with each other. So how do we do that? How do we exist in a world where we're on other sides of screens? I actually just recently wrote a blog post about this where, you know, like it's pings on Slack, obviously, it's emails incoming, it's all of these sort of digital communications. And often we're losing some of the peripheral stuff of the, how was your weekend? How are the kids doing? How are you feeling? Like we're losing a little bit of that and moving more to honestly like productivity machines, right? Where there are all of these inputs and outputs. So how do we work in this new way, in a way that maintains that human connection? And maybe Helen, we can start with you and then go back to Megan as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked this question, and I'm glad that Megan, you brought it up in your intro about human connection and how important that is. Part of that study that we looked at, we actually, to get a better holistic view of the remote employee experience, we dove into 5 different areas. One was work-life balance. Second was stress and anxiety. Third was productivity. Fourth was satisfaction with your work arrangement. And the fifth was a sense of belonging. And what we found was, for most of those factors, actually working from home, working remotely actually improved, like work-life balance, stress and anxiety compared to the office. Sense of belonging was the only one that was worse when people were working remotely compared to working in the office, for a lot of the reasons that you talked about, Erin and Megan. We're missing the flyby hallway conversations, the like, you're getting coffee, I'm getting coffee. We, haven't caught up in a long time, and so we have a conversation. And I think what I'm seeing is, personally, I don't have a perfect answer here. I think this is something that we're clearly all struggling with. And like Megan said, it's unique, right? Right now with COVID and everything, we're sort of in a unique remote work experience where, we don't have the opportunity to just go to the coffee shop and work there and kind of build, human connection, or at a co-working space with someone else. But I also want to postulate that I don't actually think that we were great at human connection when we were in the office. And so hear me out on that. I can remember so many times when, I would do exactly that. I'd walking down the hallway, see someone that I know, get the question, hey, how are you doing? And almost by default, like the answer is, oh, I'm fine. Whether I was feeling fine or not. And I think, those micro interactions give us a sense of connection and bonding, but it's really only an inch deep. Mm-hmm. And we sort of use the office as a crutch to, sort of feel like we all kind of know each other, or all kind of in the same space at the same time. But I actually think that with remote work and us, not having that crutch, we have an opportunity to actually be intentional about building much deeper human connection. For example, through Zoom and through kind of conferences like this, you have a view into my home, right? This is something that you would never get if you met me at an event or in the office. The baby is sleeping right now, but sometimes he's definitely crying or showing up at some of my meetings. And I think those moments are moments where we can actually, as coworkers, as leaders, as managers, we have an opportunity to, follow up and be really intentional about just asking those questions, getting to know each other, getting to know who we are behind the screen. And it takes a lot more sort of intentionality to it. And, that looks like lots of different things. I've seen tactics from, managers and people making space in their, one-on-ones in team meetings to actually just socialize, ask about the weekend, ask about how you're doing, make space. And, someone asked me recently, like, what do you need, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that we're all dealing with right now. Ask the other person, like, what do they need in terms of support? And the other side of it is, to the point around not having to always do things in meetings, there are really great ways to think about like asynchronous, tactics to help get to know each other as a team. one of my favorite channels at Slack. And you'll see kind of like motherhood permeate through all of my questions, because it's very top of mind right now. But there is a motherboard channel. It's private for all moms at Slack. And someone set a reminder for that channel every Thursday morning. And it says, this too shall pass. But studies have shown that it will make you feel better if you express your emotions in GIF form. So it's a beautiful thread of, moms and Giphies and just like how people are feeling in the moment, whether it's, I am exhausted and just flat out tired, or, I'm like very optimistic. There's some really funny ones in there. I think I posted one time that was like little Miss Piggy kind of breaking out of the jail cell, because I was finally getting through my baby on feeding and stuff like that. So it's stuff like that I think, we have to be, again, intentional about pulling that into how we work together, whether synchronous or asynchronous, and finding those moments that are just as important as, the like status update on work projects.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so funny. This too shall pass. I think I've said that. I lost count. My daughter's 10 next month. And I think I've said it way too many times, and it never changes, or like it's always changing, but you're always saying the same term. So I love that you have that thread. I think there's nothing greater than getting into a feeling with other people where everyone can relate. So I think that's great. And Julia mentioned that she's going to definitely pass that on to her company as well. So I love that.
We do that.
And Megan,
we do that as a team now too, actually. So for the working team, we just say like, what are your top 3 priorities? And what's the best Giphy that encapsulates like how you feel about your weekend or how you feel about your work?
Yeah. And I also think the other thing that you said that was really great, and I know it was called out as well, is just the question of what do you need? And I think that's so key, because I think it's really easy to assume what people need, and also to create like a one size fits all approach, which doesn't often fit all. In fact, it probably fits very few. And so I think like asking what you need really will unearth for the people that are on your team or your colleagues exactly what it is that they're most needing in that moment. So I love that as well. And Megan, did you want to add anything to what Helen has said
beautifully
so far?
said, Helen. I love these ideas, and I think it's just if we remember that we're all people, right? And we just remember that this can be so much more simple than we make it out to be. We tend to overcomplicate these things and say like, how do we connect with people? And it's like, wait, we know how to do this. And I couldn't agree with you more, Helen, that the office environment was not necessarily the best place for connection. How many times might a person feel very isolated when they're sitting right next to somebody in the office? So proximity is not what connects us by any means, at least on a more meaningful level. And so one of our favorite ways for our team at Distribute Consulting to connect and really ensure that we're digging in and having meaningful interactions and showing each other parts of our world, we use an app called Marco Polo. I don't know if anyone has heard of this, but it's a really fun, easy way to just record a video of yourself in a thread. And so we all do it like throughout the day, and whether we're out on a walk or whether we're doing something with our pet or our family, like it's just a quick little video message that gives people a glimpse into our life, and we have a lot of fun doing it. So that's one of our favorite ways to kind of connect asynchronously that I'd recommend to folks. And I think back to asking the good questions. I love the what do you need? Right? People are so used to starting a conversation with, how are you? And we are trained, as you said, Helen, to kind of say, I'm fine, or I'm good, and it's easy to just have that jerk reaction and not actually be a little bit more vulnerable or take more time to say what truly is going on. So a couple things I like are like a color check-in. If you guys have heard of like the red, green, yellow sort of color, and you can do that at the beginning of meetings or asynchronously via Slack daily. So people start to talk about their, how they're doing. Are they feeling Is it a really tough day and they're feeling pretty blocked, maybe burnt out, something's going on personally, that's kind of a red day? Are you somewhere in the middle between like, I am ready to go and things are flowing well, you're a yellow. And if you're like, I'm in it today, I'm green, I'm positive, things are happy. So that's one strategy I like. And then also I think asking, instead of how are you, really learn what's going on in people's lives. And so don't ask how are you more generally, ask about something specific. Say, how is your son today? You know, how was your dinner with your family last night? Be more specific, have a specific conversation, continue that intentionality. And it's just amazing. I mean, so many of my coworkers I haven't ever met in person, and I feel more connected to them than I feel to people I've worked in offices with before. So for me, that's incredibly validating. So there's a lot of hope.
Yeah. Oh, I love those. I love the tip about asking specific questions. I think that's something that, I mean, I'm going to implement that right away as well, because it's just so simple and such a shift. And to your other point about the default response, building on, you know, what Helen said of just saying, I'm doing fine. I'm good. You know, I'm great. I actually caught myself yesterday. I was chatting with someone on LinkedIn, and they had messaged me, and my energy was like a little lower. And so normally they were like, how are you doing? And normally I'd be like, oh, I'm great. Things are great. I'm awesome. And I actually caught myself, and I was like, you know what? No, I was like, I'm okay. Like, that was just okay. But it's so crazy how that's just like a default reaction, you know, it's just something that we default to. So I think there's really practical things in there that people can implement right away. But I do want to move our focus for a second over to the communication side. So we've obviously talked about connection, but let's talk about communication. And Megan, I'd like to start with you. And what I'm curious about is, obviously we've had, you know, enormous advances in technology. We have access to so many different tools to make life easier and make people much more accessible. I'm not sure that I'm completely loving this new like instantaneous society we live in, where everyone expects everything immediately. However, that said, I'll put that aside for a second. So I want to start with you, Megan. I want to talk about, you know, how do we hold sort of proper expectations while we're at work, you know, with our team and our employees or our managers or whoever it might be. And how do we use this communication in a way that actually serves us as, you know, workers who need to actually get some work done as well? So let's just start talking about technology and communication and some best practices there.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think first and foremost, it's really using this also as an opportunity to say, okay, we're no longer focused on the 9 to 5. And how can we start to ask questions of our people that we're working with about their work style? You know, what is their home life looking like? When are they most productive? So many people were not most productive during that traditional 9 to 5. So it's like, how can we support people in actually breaking out of that and letting them leverage times of days that work well for them? So I think it's starting there and, you know, reflecting for ourselves and knowing that can change throughout the year and depending on what's going on. So starting with what works well for individuals, I think, is a good place within the context of what does the company need to ensure that, you know, we might have some overlap of working hours for certain collaboration. And I think it then goes into really structuring your day. You know, I think the biggest thing, one of the biggest pitfalls for remote work success is lack of structure. And that could be lack of structure provided by, you know, if the company is not providing structure to the team, but also as an individual, you're not giving yourself enough structure. You know, I even notice on the days that I get lazy with structure, if I'm like, no, I can wing it today, my productivity is so different than on the days that I really relentlessly plan ahead, where the night before I close my computer, I'm really looking ahead to the next day. So even though I play with these different strategies and say, oh, my calendar is completely full every single day. And it's not because I'm in meetings. I've literally just like time blocked my entire day. And for me, it kind of makes me cringe because I'm like, oh, I have almost no flexibility built into my flexible work. Like, this doesn't compute. So sometimes I try to avoid it and just say, I think this is kind of blocking me, this over structure, but actually it really helps me when I really structure my day. So deep work time versus meeting time. Another thing, you know, as we kind of get into the deep work conversation that I found to be really helpful for myself is changing physical location. So when I want to get into deep work, not only have I like blocked out that time on my calendar, I've set my notifications to silent on Slack, I've put an away message up so I know that I don't have that guilt of like, maybe somebody needs me, they don't know where I am, and have I communicated? I make sure that I'm communicating everything. So I have give myself the permission, because my team's like, great, you know, no big deal. But I have to give myself the permission to say I'm kind of going offline for the next 2 hours or half of the day. Then after I do that, I go and I move to a different location. And it puts me in just a different frame of mind to say, okay, this part of the apartment is for kind of email and task-based work. And this part of the apartment is where I go for deep work and deep thinking and creativity. So those are some things I'd say.
Yeah, I love that. I love carving up the different spaces because they feel different too when you're in them, right? If I'm sitting like without a second screen and I'm on my couch, I'm much more likely to just want to do some email or light activity. But I'm the same as you. The minute I need to do like deep work focus stuff, it's 2 screens. I need the whole mission control kind of going. Yeah. And Helen, what about you? What are some of the kind of best practices or things, maybe even that came up in the study that you did for folks in terms of balancing like deep work versus disruption?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I feel like, with everything being lifted and shifted from the office to remote, a lot of people who are new to remote working is struggling with exactly that. You end up having more meetings than ever before. And so you're, whether it is just taking up more time or your day is it looks like Swiss cheese, right? There's only small chunks of time here and there between meetings. Yeah. And you just can't actually get deep work done if you only have 30 minutes. And so I think what Megan said at the beginning, really resonates with us and really resonates with me, which is you have to have that conversation, right? With yourself, with your team. It's about setting those norms and expectations together. I like to think of it, an analogy is, if you want to, get healthy, eat better, lose weight and all of that, there are good habits and hygienes that, you can kind of put together. But if, say, my husband, who really likes donuts, buys donuts and leaves them on the counter at home, it's not going to help me, figure out how to eat healthy. We have to agree to those things together. And so figuring out with your team, what are our expectations for, responding to messages? What are our expectations for what we call team synchronous hours? So is there a block of time during the day where we actually do appreciate having each other around so that we can get really quick feedback or eyes on something and be able to riff off something really quickly? And, actually saying, what are the meetings that we can say no to and very aggressively, kill the meetings that we don't need, or, be very unafraid to say no and politely decline, attending a meeting. I can get notes afterwards. I found it really, really interesting that as we were having these conversations as a team about norms, we started talking about urgency and what's the expectation for responding to messages, right? Even within those synchronous hours, that 4-hour blocks. And we kind of went back and forth in the team and we said, is there anything actually that needs an urgent response? So urgent that you would have to text me to get me to look at a thing. And we all kind of sat there and were like, not really, at least on our team, right? Like we're not, site reliability engineers who, if Slack goes down, then yes, pager duty, text, all those things. So we were sort of like, we had been responding to messages like it was just habit, right? We get a notification, we, out of habit, we were like, oh, we have to look at this now. And through talking about it, we sort of said, you know what, actually, we don't need to do this. And in that way, we gave each other permission to not, turn around and respond to a message right away. We have set out explicit, team hours and like non-team hours. And even just in our own calendar, actually put that structure in, like Megan said, block out, focus time, at least 2-hour blocks, because if you really want to get into deep work, 60 minutes actually isn't enough, right? You're just ramping up, you're starting to get warmed up in the work itself, you kind of settled in. You need that second hour to actually sort of like build, create, and get work done. And so we have made a concerted effort to, find 2-hour chunks of time that work for each of us, to build focus time. And I would say, beyond kind of putting the structure and being intentional about, building that into the norms of the team, some of the things that we're talking about with managers and leaders is around how do you set the environment for your team so that they can get into deep focus work, right? A great book that I often refer to is Flow, where how do you get into the state of flow? And the author posits that there are kind of 3 conditions for an activity to get you into the state of flow. The first is that it needs to have clear goals and path to progress. The second is that you need to have clear and immediate feedback. And the third is that there needs to be a balance between perceived challenges and perceived skill. So you need to be able to actually accomplish that task. And so as managers and leaders, not only do we need to think about the norms and setting time and space for focus, we should be really thoughtful about, are we being crystal clear about the goals and priorities of the piece of work that we're asking? Are we clear about urgency and when things need to be looked at? Are we being thoughtful about, scoping the work so that it is something that is manageable and makes sense for what we're looking for from individuals? And again, those like synchronous hours, or even just expectations for how you get feedback from each other, I think becomes really important to get into that deep focus and state of flow, so that that you have something to go to, someone to go to get feedback on work and iterate on it and get to the next step. So lots of just historical research and studies that kind of tell us best ways to do this that we can leverage.
Yeah, it's interesting. We on our marketing team at Fellow, we were doing a daily stand-up as part of like this shift to remote. We figured, okay, now's a good time to do this meeting. And what we realized was we did it for a while, and it wasn't that it wasn't successful, but when you're meeting every single day, it's sort of like you almost have to wait for that meeting to happen to start your day in a way, because you're not going to, like, to your point, get into anything and get into that flow state. So what we ended up doing was over time, we identified, this is probably not something we need to do synchronously every single time. So why don't we offset it and do, more than half of them async and just do 2 a week synchronously. And just doing that shift really created a lot more spaciousness, because for those of us that like to get up a little bit early, that's not me, by the way, that like to get up a bit early and start our day really early, they're able to like go in and populate the agenda and sort of show up to that meeting earlier than I would, for example. So it's actually been really nice to do that. But to your point, Helen, it really took sort of having that conversation and saying, is this working for us? Does this suit our needs? And being willing to change it right on the fly, and not necessarily just doing something because, it's the way it's been done, or, that it's sort of a norm. So that's one of the examples I was thinking about when you were talking about that. But I also wanted to ask, practically speaking, how do you, like, so if folks are listening to this and they're trying to carve out those 2 hours and they have that sort of Swiss cheese calendar, which, mine is just like, it's just a mess. How does one go about that practically? Like, have either of you gone about sort of shifting your calendars, and how do you do that when you're especially when you're in meetings that span cross-functionally, and getting everyone to be on your schedule might be a bit harder. So any practical tips for me, but everyone, because I'm struggling with that.
It's not easy. I think that what you said, how do you find ways as a team to make things more asynchronous is really, really crucial here. So That and finding, great ways to politely decline meetings. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am looking forward to reading the notes afterwards. But actually, right, it forces everyone to say, we need to put more things in sort of written form, both pre and post meeting. It enables people to actually say, this doesn't actually work for my schedule, but I will have a way to catch up with decisions. I will have a way to provide feedback. Another way to kind of respond that I've used is, I can't make it to that meeting, but I'm happy to provide feedback in advance if there's like pre-read material and I can comment through it. And just feeling okay with doing that, I think, is a really big piece of it.
Yeah. Megan, anything to add to that?
I love that. And I think first and foremost, absolutely, it's such a challenge. And I will say that I'm constantly reinventing my schedule. I don't know if you guys feel this too, but sometimes I feel like I'm in a groove, or we've gotten in a groove as a team, but something changes and, maybe you have a new team member, somebody's moved to a new time zone, and you kind of have to just rework everything. So I think it's getting in that, having the rigor of being okay, like you said, Erin, with change and just being really flexible. And I think constantly evaluating, even on a weekly basis, like, is this schedule working for me? Like, can I optimize for my time? Can I optimize for my productivity? And experiment with it. I do a ton of experimentation with my calendar, and some weeks I'm like, that did not work. Other weeks I'm like, okay, I think I've gone somewhere. So yeah, it's an ongoing practice for sure.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is try things out, be honest, be direct, and be patient as well, in terms of just knowing that you're going to try some things out and it may not work very well. So I do want to remind folks that are here, the chat is there. Please put any questions that you might have for either Helen or Megan in the chat, or both, and we'll definitely get to those. I still have a few other questions to ask as well. The next one I want to ask about is sort of, so we've talked about, obviously, like, we've moved into this remote work world. We're learning new ways to work together and how to process communication and manage, calendars and flow and everything else. What is some of the unlearning that we need to do? What do we need to, when it comes to, like, the things that we might be carrying forward from the office? What do you think are some of the things that we need to unlearn? And maybe, Helen, we can start with you.
Oh, so many things. There are so many habits that we've built around the office. If you just take a step back and think about it, the hallway conversations, the how are you doing is a great example. But I think that in general, right, the office is a really powerful tool. We use it for everything from, like, social bonding to innovation and creativity and getting people together to making decisions, and all of that. And I think the biggest unlearning is just not using the office as a hammer, as this, like, really blunt tool for all the things that we want to do, and actually take a step back and ask ourselves, well, if we had to actually redesign this from scratch, what is a better way to do it? I always like, when we talk about unlearning and habits, I always like bringing up the notion of innovation and creativity. So, a lot of us have said, like, oh, it's so hard to be creative and really innovate now that we're distributed. And we missed the water cooler conversations. I was a former consultant. So if you had asked me, like, I need to brainstorm and I need to be creative about, approaching this new project, what do I do first? My habit is, oh, of course, I'm going to call a meeting. I'm going to get people together, grab a whiteboard, and start brainstorming live on the whiteboard. We all do that. And we don't ask ourselves, is this actually the best way? And actually, like, tons of research has been done to show that live brainstorming like that actually leads to more consensus and more groupthink. It doesn't lead to kind of the best diverse ideas being presented in that discussion. And you can imagine why, right? Like, I'm an introvert. It has always been harder for me to just jump in and speak up when there's, like, a large room of people, throwing ideas out. And when we're in a room like that, we're actually more inclined to build on the idea that we have heard and be incremental rather than come up with something that is really left field. And so a great example of like redesigning is, one of the things that we've tried is, well, can we actually do homework, right? Be intentional, do homework beforehand and say, let's all come up with a set of 10 ideas that we're really excited about on our own, individually, when we feel most creative and most productive, then actually use a much more efficient meeting and time together to share out what we've come up with. Spend the first 5 minutes, reading the ideas across the room, and you'll actually find that you get a much wider range of ideas and perspectives that way. And from there, you can sort of think about, well, okay, great. Now, what do we want to do next? And you can put structure around that. You can put structure around innovation and creativity, rather than relying on luck, or that serendipity is going to happen over the water cooler, for example. There's so much, like, that's always a great example for breaking the office crutch, and really rethinking what's possible now that you don't have the constraints of those four walls.
Yeah, I love that. And Megan, did you have anything that you wanted to add? What are you unlearning yourself? What are you seeing other people having to unlearn?
For me is and has been the biggest challenge for me as I've been working remotely, is to allow myself breaks, to not just work tirelessly until I'm burnt out every day, until I get to that point of exhaustion where I'm just staring at my screen and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm done now. And that is still a daily challenge for me. So I think really setting your day up for those breaks and for those transitions, signaling the start and end of the workday with routines that are healthy for you, that make you happy, are really big things. We have to replace that commute with something else. We have to context shift into work and home, because although we can have work-life balance, we do really need to be able to turn it off and turn it on. And so practicing that muscle, it's really hard. It's like very unnatural, So I think it's hard for everyone. Yeah. It's still very hard for me. But I think the other thing would be just, in an office environment, we were so used to being able to go up and tap people on the shoulder, right? Or think that people are being productive because we can see them. How many times have you heard somebody say like, oh, well, so-and-so's not here yet today, or, so-and-so seems to be taking a lot of vacation. And there's all of these questions around whether or not an individual is pulling their weight, but it's really because we're not maybe trusting people to be adults. We're not setting the right expectations for performance and results. And so I think we just really need to step into like trusting each other more and more, and trusting that even when we don't see somebody active on Slack, it doesn't mean that they're not working. No need to ping them and see like, hey, are you there? Trust people to do their work, set good expectations, and let people unlock their own productivity and power in what they're doing. I think that's the biggest one. And I think I see it's hard for a lot of companies who are transitioning to remote, still wondering, I can't see you. Are you doing what you say you're doing? So that needs to be unlearned. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I've honestly seen some folks talking online as well about some really odd practices that some companies have put in place around wanting like monitoring software, and I look at that stuff and I'm thinking that is not the direction to go by any means. 100%. Yeah. So we've got a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to go to Julia's question. So Julia says, do you all have any podcasts that you listen to that have inspired new ideas for working remotely, or your faves in general? Would be great to hear. So do either of you have any podcast recommendations?
Honestly, I am not a huge podcast listener. A lot of the times I like to work with music. And so during the day I have music on in the background. And when I'm listening to podcasts, I start my day. Part of my morning routine actually is to start with NPR's Up First. It's 15-minute bite size on kind of what's going on. I do that with my coffee. And if I want to sort of unwind to a podcast, I'm usually listening to something food related.
I love that. You know, it's funny, Megan, I'm the same as you. I can't listen to podcasts necessarily while I work, depending on what I'm doing. I find it really challenging if I'm trying to do any writing or anything like that. I just can't. But yeah, definitely music helps as well.
Totally.
And Helen, do you have anything
I
that you're listening to right now?
Yeah, I would say similarly about not being able to listen to podcasts while I work. It's always music, and usually no words to the music. But I similarly start my day with the Wall Street Journal, sort of the 10-minute soundbite of like what to know about yesterday and today. What I would say about just like ideas for, new ideas for working remotely, I find that just having conversations with random people across the company always generates really great ideas. And it's a reminder for me to reach out to people outside of my team and set up that informal one-on-one and say like, hey, how are things going? Around the point around building human connections intentionally, but also to get great ideas. Like, what are you doing that's working for you? Like someone told me recently, oh my gosh, Zoom fatigue is a whole thing. And so they're like, we used to do walking one-on-ones with other people. So I just decided to take my one-on-ones on the phone and actually walking now. And so that, gets you out of your space. It gets you walking again. It gets you off of the screen. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't, connect with someone outside of my team and said like, hey, like, how are things going? What's working for you? We're all experimenting right now. And we're all figuring out styles that work for, different teams, different individuals. So I find that actually learning from each other is a great way to go.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And it's true. Everyone that I speak with or speak to about remote work, they're all doing things a little different. And then I hear that they're doing something in a certain way. And I can't help but think, I'm like, ooh, that's a great idea. I'm going to start doing that. And the walking meetings was actually one of them as well. I had someone recently said that they were going to start doing their meetings in that format. And I thought to myself, I'm like, why wasn't I doing this? And we're in Canada, so I was like, why haven't I been doing this through our nice weather? That would have been so much more helpful. Yeah, I love that. And then there's another question that says, how do you help others that may not think about remote work the same way you do to either learn or unlearn the essentially healthy habits, but the habits that are needed for remote work? So how do we help others?
It's a good question.
I know it's a big question.
And a tough one. I think it's like anything where maybe you're interacting with others who might not hold the same views as you. I like to just lead with curiosity, right? And be a listening ear and try to understand where somebody else is coming from, and have a conversation, because at the end of the day, like, remote work is great, but there are downsides, and so listening to reasons why somebody might not share the same views as us on remote work, we'll learn something too, and maybe we can help build a better solution to, solve some of those problems. But I think listening and curiosity is always the best place to start.
Yeah, I love that. I
would echo that sentiment. The beauty of remote work is that it is an opportunity for us to figure out what works for us. And what works for us actually might not work for someone else. And so curiosity, listening, and just having that understanding. Like, I have a manager who works a ton of hours, but he has zero expectations that we're responding to him late at night. And we can have that conversation. And that's not to say that it's, unhealthy or healthy for him. He loves, catching up with a lot of different things that are happening around the organization, reading up on kind of the latest, research and all of that. And that's something that he enjoys, even though to me, it feels like he's working a lot. To him, he's like, I just want to absorb everything, and that's okay, as long as he doesn't expect that I'm doing the same thing in all of those hours. So yeah, curiosity is a great way to frame it.
Yeah. So I do want to bring Alexandra back on. I know we're at about a minute left. I think Alexandra. Yeah. Oh, there she comes. So Rosemary, I know that you just posted a question. Maybe we could do it in 30 seconds. We can maybe answer it real quick. Let's see. So Rosemary says, for those of us knowledge workers who also work with hourly essential workers, we need to be very sensitive about the privileges we have to even practice remote work. This is an ongoing issue in my organization, as sometimes the knowledge workers don't practice good habits because they feel guilty. Any quick advice on this? Can we summarize? I mean, I suppose some of the things that we've already talked about definitely apply. But any final parting words of wisdom for Rosemary?
Hard one. It's such a hard one.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, be kind to one another, meet people where they are. Again, I think curiosity and having conversations and learning about others' experiences are important. And, ask them what they need. I think that was a great question, that Helen posed.
Yes.
Ask them what they need and build from there.
Agree. Well, that feels like a great place to, or Helen, I saw you come off mute. Did you have anything to add?
Oh, I was just going to +1 all of that.
Oh, nice. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has honestly been a great conversation. I feel like there are so many additional things that we could have talked about and explored with remote work, but I know there's a lot of people that are going through very similar things. So I really appreciate both of you sharing your experiences and your knowledge and insights. It's been really great.
Yeah, and we will have the recording of this session available. We'll email it out to everyone later. Everyone's also going to receive a post-event survey, and we would love to hear about feedback you had about the event or the topic or anything really that you want to say. Thank you so much, Helen and Megan, for joining us. This was such a great conversation. I'm so happy that you were able to spend an hour with us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both so much. This was awesome. Great chatting, Helen.
Yeah. Awesome. And thanks everyone for tuning in from all over the world. This was really fun. And have a great rest of your day. Hopefully you get some deep work time now. Yes. This is done. You can go get some important work done. All right.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Bye, all.
Bye.